you're a pervert, I'd happily rip your... if I think it would be a service to society, but I'm going to give you a chance. I don't know what you're capable of, but I don't want you anywhere near her outside of work. No watching, no following. Do you understand? If you keep it up, I'll kill you. Hallam leaned forward, made reckless by the wine and the knowledge that he was on home territory. Well, since you've joined the Brotherhood, and let's share a little knowledge. What else did you see then? Did you see us make love? Did you see the way she looked at me, the things she did for me, or have you been imagining it? And what does that make you? He half expected to be attacked, but Alistair did not move. Even his mouth maintained its droll grimace, so Hallam continued, because guess what? I don't have to imagine anything. Do you miss the way she presses her hand down on the side of your face when she's pumping away on top? And how rough you were with her sometimes? Those slaps and squeezes which hurt her and which you weren't exactly sure she enjoyed as much as you? And the guilt around your eyes when she went quiet afterwards? She told you that? He asked quietly. Remember that skylight above her bed, and how you liked to keep the light on? Even with the blind down, it was a grandstand view. That's right, mate. I was there, every rancid grunt and thrust of the way, and when you lay there afterwards, like a great puncture balloon, and she padded off to the toilet and locked the door, I followed her round just by the window, and I saw the disgust on her face as she washed your slime out of her. Alistair's shoulders had bunched, a muscle worked reflexively in his jaw, but he waited as if Hallam might have more to say. Then with a great effort he sat back and smiled. It was nice of you to join us, he said, reverting to his ironic drawl. This response genuinely surprised Hallam. He had succeeded in shocking Alistair. But he detected something else in those pinprick eyes, an expression beyond anger. Excitement, possibly. Was Alistair feeling unexpected pleasure from the idea of being watched? They stared at each other in silence. The hostility had transformed into a new tension. An unspoken dialogue of opposites, dare and counter-dare. Had he found the chance of a perfect consummation for his obsession after all these years, and was that tentative affirmation he saw in Alistair's expression? Hallam encountered disgust and enlightenment simultaneously, but it only lasted a second. Lucy came back in, and she must have heard Alistair's last comment, because she sat down next to her brother on the sofa and smiled in mild embarrassment, misunderstanding. I wasn't that long, was I? Alistair picked up his jacket and got ready to leave. Are you off? Asked Lucy, surprised. It was a pleasure to meet you, Lucy. Maybe see you later. Hallam addressed Alistair in a light voice and put a hand on Lucy's knee. Well, what a good idea. Why don't we all meet again, like I did with you and Kate, eh, Alistair? If Alistair understood the significance of the invitation, he did not show it. Instead, he turned towards the door. Bye. Lucy sounded a little disappointed that the party was breaking up so abruptly. Hallam got up and opened the door for Alistair, who slung a heavy arm round his shoulder and put his lips uncomfortably close to his host's ear. I feel sorry for you, but you're an interesting case. I hope you learnt something. Alistair's eyes unfocused for a moment. Perhaps I did. He stepped outside and started to descend the stairs, but then he turned and looked up at Hallam, thoughtful, one hand resting on the stairwell's central stone pillar. Tell me, which is worse, seeing or imagining? Hallam leant against the door jamb and looked out through the narrow window above Alistair's head at the grey tenements dimly lit by white lamps, the shadows of other people's lives lighting across the window panes. Imagining. And what's worse, watching or... Alistair paused, being watched. Hallam answered with the sympathy of someone who had asked himself similar questions. You don't have a choice about what's in you. Don't worry about it. Alistair appeared perplexed. Hallam smiled with the knowledge of his one certainty. It's all there is. Alistair seemed to be satisfied with this. He nodded, then raised a hand in farewell and slowly made his way down. Hallam shut the door and returned to the sitting room where Lucy had lit another cigarette. He sat down self-absorbed. Funny chap, your friend, Lucy commented as she picked up a magazine from the table. Hallam looked up. Did you like him? She shrugged and flipped a few pages of the magazine. She seemed unconcerned, another positive sign in her case. So am I going to meet this girlfriend of yours, then? That's what I'm here for, isn't it? Meet me at work tomorrow. She's my boss. Lucy put down the magazine and adopted her frank tone of voice. Why are you so angry with me? I'm not like you. I don't do indifference. Don't be so effing arrogant. He assessed the hostility in her face. Was her response calculated to prove that she did care after all? He sneered at his bitter amusement. She was a phony, and there was nothing to be held more in contempt. I had problems too. You're not the only one, but I can understand if you don't want to see me again. She stood up and made for the door. He followed her. That's right, walk away again. Lucy stopped, realizing that she had forgotten her bag. She had turned round and had back to the kitchen to pick it up, enduring his gaze. Meaning? She said briskly, looking the strap over her shoulder. 5 years ago you walked away and dropped me in crap. You called to the newspaper about the development of the lakes, Lucy. Don't you remember? It wasn't me. She managed to put an almost convincing level of indignation into her voice. Hallam slowly shook his head in disgust. She headed for the door again, only to halt once more. What was it now? He followed her gaze down to the left. There in the corner was a spare coil of nylon rope. It had been there for so long that Hallam had grown blind to it. She picked it up and held up the noose end, which suddenly appeared invidious. When she turned round, he saw that she had gone pale. What is this for? He blushed, knowing what she feared it might be, loop it round the neck and kick away the chair, and knowing himself what its real purpose was. What could he say? I do abseiling, as a hobby. So you've still got your head for heights, then? She moved slowly towards him. He became nervous. Yes, so what? She reached out quickly and grabbed his wrists, turning his palms upwards to inspect them. She ran her thumbs over their rough surfaces. It seemed to convince her that he was telling the truth because her relief came in the form of a smile. She lightly squeezed his fingers. They used to be so soft when you were a baby. He pulled his hands quickly away and wiped them on his trousers as if it might remove the gesture of affection. Who else would have called the paper, he asked, if not you? Lucy shrugged. Verity? She went into the sitting room and sat down on the sofa. Hallam followed. Why would she sabotage Julius's project? To pin it on you, to get you thrown out. He hesitated. Verity was capable of it. He knew that. He resorted to accusation. You were on her side. It was never friendship. She trapped me with her confidences. She knew I was the only one who would come between her and Julius. She paused. Look, okay, we were friends for a while. My friends at Cambridge loved her. My friend Alex loved her. Did I mention Alex? We almost had a relationship until I told Verity about him. She was really sweet at first. Took us out to lunch. The next thing I knew, she was having an affair with him. Once she realized I knew, she was completely brazen about it. She threw herself on my mercy, knowing that then I couldn't say anything to Julius, and it drew me in, made me responsible for it too somehow. I can see that now. She glanced up at him. I expect you're wondering why I didn't just tell Julius. It was the one thing that he was not wondering as it happened, but she continued. He seemed happy, it seemed wrong, and she began to ask me to provide alibis when she was seeing Alex, and I said yes. I suppose I didn't want to let on that I was jealous that she'd hurt me. She is a genius at transferring guilt, believe me. Is. Verity in the present tense. Hallam had difficulty entertaining the thought. His stepmother had been locked up in his past for so long. That's why I left Hallam, and why I stayed out of contact. It wasn't about Alex. He wasn't anything special in the end, but I couldn't take any more of the manipulation. She poisoned everything, my whole idea of family, and I hated myself, and I thought you'd be better off not seeing me again, and that you'd have an easier time of it without me. South Africa was the way out, along with the rest. Hallam assessed what she had said. He had a nose for people who had been through analysis, and her confession had the smell of the couch all over it. Since he did not say anything, she smiled weakly. Well, I'm chucking in that diamonds job. I've had enough of squinting with a hangover at little bits of rock. I was thinking of doing something worthwhile, like you, and work, maybe. Stick with diamonds, said Hallam. His comment seemed to come from a distance. So how did you cope? She asked, a note of curiosity creeping into her voice. All things considered, you've come through it comparatively well. She took a deep breath and looked at her again. I put it beneath me. Lucy sat back and nodded thoughtfully. I think I know what you mean. I think you don't. She absorbed the hostility that had flared up again. Why'd you do it, Hallam? What? I heard what happened after I left, the nails in the tree. She actually thought he was capable of doing it, his own sister. He clenched and unclenched his fists. Maybe they were right. Maybe he was capable of it. In fact, maybe he was capable of a great deal more. The tree surgeon was all right in the end, sort of, said Lucy eventually. He got some use back in his arm. They sewed it back on him at the infirmary. Compensation, too. Did Julius tell you all this? He asked. Yes, he did. And what did you think? Lucy laughed nervously. Hallam's eyes skittered over her. She rubbed her hands between her thighs as if warming them up. I found it hard to believe, at first. So you didn't do it? You didn't think to check with me. Dad said that afterwards you told him, it doesn't matter about Julius, Hallam said, jumping suddenly to his feet. What about me? And with that last word he looked wildly about him, to the windows and to the other rooms, peering up at the trapdoor for some chink of the wood through which someone could inconceivably spy on him. Were they there listening in, noting down his impotent squeak of self-assertion? Lucy watched him scared from the sofa. Did you? Hallam scratched his head. He laughed, rubbed his neck, and then he looked down at her with dry eyes, decided to lie. Sure. Lucy held his gaze, but he saw the fear, and it made him pitifully proud, until he realized that maybe she was not scared of him, but for him. Well, he asked, aren't we supposed to cry and hug now? Isn't that what they do in therapy, now that it's all out? Lucy seemed to deflate. She leaned her elbows on her knees, ran her fingers through her hair, and shook her head. All out? You call that all out? Why do you care? She looked at him then, and Hallam regretted asking. She was about to open her emotions wide in the manner of someone who is capable of being loved. He resented and envied her capacity to do this. "You're right, I didn't care," she said. "Back then I thought I could drive away and leave it all behind, and that meant you too. I hated her, and I wanted you to hate her too. I made things worse for you. I encouraged you, and I am so sorry for manipulating you like that." He waited in case she was going on, then nodded sagely and raised his eyebrows sarcastically. "My, thanks for the apology." She wiped her eyes, embarrassed by the tears that had sprung up. Hallam wanted to dismiss her then, to send her back behind the protective glass to his past, but she had destroyed the barrier, and humiliatingly he had to know. Was Verity like when you visited?" he asked, cheeks scorching. Lucy suddenly lightened and leaned forward, as if she was imparting gossip. "It was awful. She put on this really formal lunch. I felt totally underdressed, and it was all such false celebration because I knew she didn't want me there. She cooed over me like we were long-lost girlfriends, kept going on about the redecorations, the redesigns, the new interiors. Everything needed in silk and brocade, and Julius clinging. When I first turned up, he looked sort of scared, but after that he was all over me, staring at me when he thought I wasn't looking. He'd not seen me for ages, I know, but it was like he was searching my face for something." "Or someone," muttered Hallam. "The dead are all in our faces," he thought. "I wanted to see Dad. I wanted to see if there was a chance, however small, of some kind of reconciliation." "They killed her," Lucy frowned. "It was suicide. They were screwing together right under her nose. What did they expect? There was illness. Infidelity happens. You weren't there. You were at university. What do you know? He told me what happened. Did he know?" "So tell me what happened." "You know this. She was just out of hospital after an episode. She seemed to have stabilized, and then Julius has tortured himself about this. Maybe you have too." He shook his head. "He's lying." Lucy got up and came over to comfort him, but he shook her off violently. "Get off. Sit down. Hasn't it occurred to you that the two of them might have planned it to happen to push her into it? Think about what you're saying, Hallam. Dad is not a murderer." It was obvious what Julian was cheating. He made it obvious. It was a matter of time. "You don't know this. What would you do in her situation? What is the first thing you would demand? That Verity goes. But does Verity get sacked? No. Julia says no. What can she do? Leave? Where to? Not to her family. There aren't any left. To her friends? Where are they? Back to the hospital she loathed? Stop." Tears were running down Lucy's face now. "That's why she killed herself, because he left her no alternative. They may as well have held her under with their own forehands." Lucy wept. Then she grabbed her jacket and rushed out of the door and down the staircase. Hallam felt enervated by his cruelty. He strode over to the window and looked down, waiting to see her emerge at the bottom of the building. She couldn't win him over. No chance. It was all justified, even if his pleasantly growing sense of righteousness was not quite matched by a calmer belief in being entirely right. It did not seem to matter now, in the afterglow of the confrontation. This must be what they call moral conviction, he thought. He savored his new sense of power. Lucy came into sight, clattering over the cobbles. He wondered whether Alastair was watching the mouth of the close, waiting to bump into her, or perhaps they had exchanged numbers, or she had mentioned her hotel when he had gone out for wine. Whichever way, Hallam had a hunch that Alastair wouldn't let him down. Hallam lay on his mattress in the loft. The smell of wood and quietness no longer lulled him. Instead, it felt stifling. He turned over and squeezed his eyes shut, but the letter would not let him sleep. At last, with an almost petulant whimper of frustration, he sat up, rolled off the mattress, and sought it out. He had tossed away all those months ago, acting indifferent, trying to fool himself, but sadly he knew exactly where it was, in the corner, under the rumpled computer printouts and legacy literature in its thick envelope. He took it out and returned to the mattress. He opened it without pausing, his fingers operating as if by remote control, by a need so long denied that it seemed hardly his own. "My darling Hal," it began. This was as far as Hallam had got on the morning that he had received it, those few days after his 21st birthday. His mother's intimate use of his abbreviated name was enough to make him recoil and thrust the letter away. Now, like then, he was seized by an instinct, strengthened by a strictly observed habit, to retreat from his source of turbulence and pain. This time he did not obey it. "If you ever come to read this, it will mean that the lawyers have done what they promised, and that I have left you probably a long time ago. It may be that you wanted to forget me, and who knows, you may have succeeded, and if so, I apologize. I appreciate that by running away from pain and suffering, I only pass it on. But I do not apologize for that, even to you, Hal, because nothing needs less apologies than the desire not to live." Hallam threw back his head. He was laughing, with genuine pleasure. He had never known his mother as an adult. He had never had the chance to talk to her about her thoughts and feelings. How could he have done when he was barely 13? He was enjoying the attention his mother-to-son chat, so long delayed, even if it was a suicide note, so nice to catch up. So how were you? Hallam laughed wildly again. Why hadn't he done this before? He asked himself. Why had he been so scared of? I love you as I write. I want you to know that, but as you're reading this when I am dead, and the dead don't love, there's no point pretending. Even as I write, I can't feel I am dying. The decision is being made, it's done, and that takes away everything with it, except, oddly, for the time being, the desire to tell the truth. Anyway, you're old enough now to hear the truth, although I can hardly guess what kind of man you are. It feels ridiculous addressing one's son nearly 10 years into the future. You might even think that it's slightly in bad taste, considering what I have to tell you. She has driven me to it. Oh, I know, the decision is mine, and it doesn't help not having a mind you can trust, but she has made living insufferable for me. There are childish things she does, but childish things are often the most savage. For instance, she switches my pills, my prescriptions, the lithiums, and all the others. Actually, it is no joke, my recent sojourns in the secure ward, you know the joys of that from your visits, have been its direct result, blowing my top when I need calming, crushing dissent when I need stabilizing. It really is most distressing. I have no proof, of course, and I'm hardly reliable, am I? And the rest, the taunting obviousness of the way she flaunts her affair with Julius, you must have noticed, even at your age, the age you were. It's humiliating, I suppose, but above all, incredibly annoying. Annoying? Now he remembered the way her mind would switch back bizarrely on itself, probably through a prescription haze, but then now and then become lucid and pressing. Through the utterly inappropriate moments of levity, there was a growing sense of weary matter-of-factness. I do appreciate Julius's needs to escape from me. In fact, I know for certain that he will be happier when I am gone, although this is not a reason for what I am going to do in my life. I mean, just a pleasant consequence. I can't say I think much of his taste in women, although she is extraordinary in her own way. It is childish what she has done, you see, as childish as the other stuff, leaving the gas on and suggesting it was me, questioning whether you are safe in my charge, which really is ridiculous because you are always safe with me. I wonder more whether you will be safe without me. I can hear her moving around downstairs as I write, the sound of her steps. I'm going now, Hal. Let this upset you. It will help you to live better eventually, if that is what you want. Enjoy the money. It's not much, is it? Do you know, I'm not at all sure that this is very interesting. I had better go and get organized. She had not bothered to sign off. Hallam let the letter rest on his knees. He lay back on the bed. His mind was curiously blank. A great and leaden calm settled on him, and he slept.